And we're live. All right, so rising rents in San Diego. First, let me introduce our guest today. We have Steve Ploetz. Steve Ploetz. Welcome to the show, Steve Ploetz. Nice to have you here. We also have Erika Walker and Jason Gire from Noble Real Estate Services and Property Management. So, rising rents in San Diego obviously sounds like a problem. Actually, I was looking at this, Steve. You'd be interested in this. I was trying to find similar communities to San Diego to make a comparison. Very difficult to do, right? There's so few places in the world that are this awesome. But if you start looking at the places that actually do compare, and I mean internationally, not just, okay, let's say Hawaii might be one that's here locally, in the States.
Looking at the rental market.
Looking at all aspects of real estate. Cost of living is what I was searching.
Okay.
And trying to find places that are similar to San Diego. You find places like Barcelona, Spain, Hawaii is one of them. There's very few places that are like San Diego. And if you look at the costs of living in San Diego versus these places, dramatically cheaper. Dramatically. This is why a lot of the international community still see San Diego as a bargain. So I do want to preface with the macro reality that what we have in San Diego is still pretty undervalued in comparison.
So you're talking the cost of living, like looking at San Diego versus the Bay Area as an example of a market that's very expensive, cost of living very high, rents and...
Bay Area, way worse than San Diego. I don't even think you can compare them. I mean, climate-wise, maybe economically you could say, hey, the Bay Area is advanced beyond San Diego, but outside of that, there is no advantage to lifestyle. I'm talking about actual living, like climate, lifestyle, beaches, nice weather, that kind of stuff is what I'm talking about.
Gotcha.
Decent economy, not necessarily on top of one another, so not one of these places like Dubai or whatever, like you can't even, but that's unfathomable price-wise in comparison to San Diego, even that.
Right.
So being in the United States, I think, matters. If you just look at Hawaii, for example, it's twice as expensive.
Right.
It's double. And you're much further away from people, if that's what you want.
Civilization.
Yeah, if that's what you want, then I could see where that may be valuable to you. But you could also do that in San Diego, could you not? Of course you could.
Absolutely.
I'll answer the question for you.
Absolutely.
So
I'm
we
just
took
a prop here.
Yeah. Steve
great.
Ploetz.
All right. I know.
So it's Ploetz, by the way. I'm messing with my homie. So rising rents. So on the property management side, and I know that we've been trying to arrange this for a while because we want someone to come in and speak on that. Just, from your perspective, Jason, what do you see happening with rents?
Rents have gone up. Plain and simple. I don't think that, like everything else, the cost of gasoline has gone up. The cost of our electricity has gone up. It has to continue to grow with the economy. When we were first asked about coming in and talking about raising rents or the cost of living here in San Diego, I was kind of confronted with why should we be penalized or why should we be capped on our rent amounts? I still maintain that San Diego is an affordable place to live. You might not be able to afford, say, different zip codes like La Jolla or Carmel Valley or Leeuwenhoek, or these types of places. But move a little further east, things are a little more affordable. So there's a place for everyone. But yeah, rents are going up certainly. We've seen. I would say on average about a 10% increase in rents over the last 4 years. Yeah.
Oh, you think that's it?
Yeah, I do. From say 2014 to 2018, what was $2,000 a month is now $2,200 to maybe $2,300 a month. Yeah.
Have you seen a slowdown recently at all?
In rentals, no.
No?
No. I think that it's a springboard for a lot of people to home ownership, first and foremost. Coming out of the recession that we just got out of, we were renting like gangbusters. Everybody was going foreclosure or short sale, so they needed emergency housing. But the one constant is, lucky for us, there is a housing shortage in San Diego. And so with providing rentals, they usually fly off the shelf. And even with the 500 properties that we currently manage, we only have 6 that are currently available, and I think 2 are vacant. So
yeah.
They go.
So
I wonder.
I have a question.
Oh,
I'm gonna
don't you
interrupt.
dare.
Always has
Don't you dare.
So, in a competitive market like this,
Mm-hmm.
how does somebody rent? Like, what are ways that if I need a place to live,
Sure.
and I've got 2 weeks, 3 weeks to find a place,
Yeah.
and I'm willing to give up whatever is necessary.
Sure.
What would be, from your standpoint as a property manager, what gets me in the door?
Well, so how we operate is we are first come, first serve as far as if you're qualified and we can verify income, employment, and the like. We're first come, first serve. If you-
So have all that documentation.
Yes,
ready, have
totally.
employment, have if you can have your credit score. if
Just
you
like
can-
buying a house, you wouldn't go out, at least I hope you wouldn't go out looking at houses unless you've already got an application in with a lender and been credit qualified to purchase the home. That's really the setup. If you want to empower yourself and be first in line, get your documentation ready, have your application completed, and do as we say, and you'll get it.
Do as we say, and nobody gets hurt.
No,
You don't get the place.
But it's interesting because, like,
I got it.
It's frequent that we get a crowd of people in, and they're all bickering about who's going to get the property. Well, the one who's most prepared, simply.
So let me ask you a question about where to find them, because there are a lot of people looking for rentals, and one of the things I've noticed in my market where I live, Del Mar, and Ahmed, we'll get to your question in a second. Thanks for the comment. We are live right now on Facebook, so if you have a comment or a question for Steve Ploetz or either of our other guests today,
But I'm so glad my name's Gire, not Ploetz.
please drop it in the comment section,
And
and we will
Walker.
definitely address it
Easy.
for you.
Easy.
Where do people find? So, like in Del Mar, for example, a lot of people are like, I can't find anything. Well, if you're just looking on the MLS, you aren't going to find anything except for race rentals, pretty much. Like people in Del Mar have gone back. It's gone all the way back to old school sign in the yard stuff because they've realized that if I put an ad somewhere, 1,000 people
Right.
will respond, and there's no way to sift through that.
Right.
So I'm just going to go old school, put the sign in the yard, get 6 calls, because that's all I want to deal with. I know I'll rent it. So it's where do you look? Like where are people wanting to put advertisements? Where can you find inventory?
Okay, great question. So we're syndicated. Our inventory is syndicated on over 50 different websites. Now, fortunately, we have a software program that handles all of our showings. So we don't have to talk. We might get 200-300 emails, but we don't have to talk to everybody, and they have to go through our qualifications. So initially, yes, you get a flood of calls, but you sift it down to who's most qualified, and it makes it more manageable. Now, where would you go to find them? Craigslist used to be the hotbed for rentals, but now I would say that it's riddled with scams, and we've been copied. Our ads have been copied on Craigslist. Send your money to this remote location, and we'll mail you a key. It's completely illegitimate. So I would say, whatever source you're using, there are many. There's the automated housing referral network. There's military by owner. We don't deal with Section 8, which is subsidized rentals through HUD, but Section 8 has its own website also for qualified property. So really, I would say if you're interested in finding a rental, call a local property manager. It's no skin off our back to just point you in the direction of where you can find legitimate rentals.
Based on what you're looking for.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. That makes sense. Yeah, because I think different areas have different things going on.
Totally.
And what we found in Del Mar is you just got to get out and walk around.
Isn't that something?
Old school.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Well, and what I say is with gas being $4 a gallon, the days of driving around looking for a for rent sign are over because it's just not cost effective. When all of us typically have the handheld device that you can search everything you need. And that's really how business gets done at a high level with volume and efficiency. So just make sure that the sites that you are searching are legitimate.
Erika, what do you think?
I agree. You know?
What he said.
What he said. But that's also a good reason to hire us. I mean, why do it on your own? You know, why do all that work and put it on all the sites and duplicate your listings and have to pay to put it on the military by owner? Because those costs, those aren't free. So, instead of doing all that and taking all the calls and screening all the people and meeting the people at the property, or when they don't show up and you're taking time out of your day and you're driving around. I mean, we talk to so many people who are just like, I know, I'm tired, I don't want to do this. Well, stop.
Yeah.
That's what we do.
Why hasn't the rental side gone the way of the sales side, where agents that represent buyers, of course, are compensated. Agents that represent tenants typically aren't compensated, or they're compensated a very small amount of $100 or $200.
Right.
I guess the bigger question is, it seems like there is such an opportunity there. And I would say that many renters would be willing, in my opinion, to pay somebody $1,000 or whatever, some kind of fee, in order to, you handle it, here's what we're looking for, go find it. Because the days of scrolling through Craigslist and feeling like, is this a scam?
Yeah,
no, I'm not going
totally.
to wire
Yeah.
money to
Right.
Kenya.
Yeah.
I mean, just that
Right.
kind of stuff.
Right.
Why don't you think that it's happened?
I think that, well, first and foremost, you're right. Agents who represent prospective tenants aren't compensated enough in comparison, right?
Right.
It's not equitable for them to do that. And I also think that there would be an inclination for that to go south in a hurry. In other words, if you charged an upfront fee and then you were lackluster with your efforts to locate housing, then we'd have a grievance over, you know, I was taken for my money and they didn't perform, that kind of thing. And if you turned it around and say, well, you get paid upon completion as an incentive, I just don't think. I've been in the business for 20 years. I just think that real estate agents are a little bit lazy when it comes to, say, a referral fee for a tenant versus an escrow check.
Absolutely. And I would say, because when they look at the escrow check versus the...
Yeah.
I mean,
it's a tank of gas
it's-
versus a couple months worth of bills, right?
absolutely. It's just so interesting to me, because I know that as agents,
Yes.
we're all agents,
Yes.
that many times that is the first step of building a relationship with someone, of building trust with a potential client.
Sure.
Is, hey, I'm moving into San Diego area, but I don't want to buy yet because I don't know the neighborhood. So I'm interested in renting for a year or two,
Right.
and then I'd like to get serious about buying. And for most realtors, it's not that first step. They can only go, I'm sorry, that's not what I do, or there's no money in it, or I can go on Craigslist just like you.
Yeah.
It's just interesting. As
Well,
a,
I can answer that a little bit more. I don't think that maybe homeowners don't have enough fear to know the liabilities that they're setting themselves
That's a
up
great
for.
Couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more.
You know, they don't know the fear. They don't know what how open they are to liability. They don't know how many rights tenants really have against them.
Yeah.
So there's no market for it. That's my
That's
opinion.
and let me just add to that California is set up to protect tenants more so than it is landlords and property owners. With that being said, for instance, the state has allocated funds for legal representation for tenants, and I say deadbeat tenants because you know, if you're in court, there's usually a problem because they haven't paid. With that being said, we have to pay for our attorneys. They don't have to pay for their attorneys. They reward bad behavior, essentially. So this is a very litigious business, and I always, I was telling Erika yesterday, we just don't make enough money on one house for us to do this job. You'd say we were insane. So how we justify it is volume.
Right.
That's the only way, because quite frankly, it's. I mean, we could lose our shirt tomorrow legally. So you really want to make sure that whoever you're working with, they're insured, they're licensed, have affiliations with NARPM, which is Residential Property Management, just like North American, rather National Association of Realtors. These things are important. Oftentimes, people will go to for rent by owners because they can tug at their heartstrings and they feel sorry and they'll buy their story and invite a tenant to live in their property, and then they're absolutely regretting it and they've got to go through the courts to get them out. A lot of property owners don't know this. You know, their coworkers say, well, a friend of mine rented their own, they got a contract from Office Depot, it worked out just fine. So until you really get into the throes of the day in and day out, what happens with habitability issues, health and safety issues, what are the tenants' rights, what are the owner's rights, people haven't considered the pitfalls of this business.
Right.
So
I want to say something, not this as legal advice, because I'm not an attorney.
Sure.
But and maybe you guys will piggyback off this, but the rule has always been, or my understanding has always been, that you want to have your rental properties in an LLC. All rental properties should be in an LLC, not held as your own personal, the way that it's titled, the loan or whatever should always be an LLC if possible, because there's a dramatic amount of liability involved. Things can happen at properties, and you can be blamed as the owner, and they can attack you personally for that. You can be sued personally. Now, if you have insurance, the insurance will protect you to a certain degree. If you don't, that's where umbrella policies come in to say, okay, hey, get a $5 million umbrella. You have 10 rental properties. This is just to protect you personally, in case something happens. And anything could happen, and I'll give you an interesting example. Joanne, if you're watching, she's my landlord. She's awesome. But we have a really crazy situation going on right now where we're literally living in a construction site. I mean, they're refacing the entire complex, and it is an absolute nightmare. But there's all sorts of crazy things going on, where construction workers are leaving tools and nails, and it's just. They've destroyed different parts of the property. They're actually in my unit right now fixing 8 holes in the wall that were created during the demolition period. So 8 holes went all the way through the wall, 5 in the living room, 3 in a closet.
Tell me that they're compensating you doing this.
They've tore up all sorts of things. And then yesterday someone came and they actually broke the window. So the window, not tempered glass, of course. So it breaks at this one point, and leading up to that point is basically about 20 different dagger-shaped pieces of glass being held together like a house of cards.
Tell me you sleep right underneath it.
I do. That's it. It's 1 foot away from the bed.
Oh my God.
So I called her because she's great and really get along, just to say, hey, I want you to know, because I know the liability involved. If one of those pieces of glass just slips and falls out the other side and hits someone, they will be injured severely. One of the big pieces actually fell and stayed inside of the shredded
like the dual pane
area. It was the screen, which was all shredded, but it just barely stayed inside. But I mean, it was like a medieval axe. Like, that's the shape of this piece of glass, and it fell like that. And I'm just going, oh my goodness, this is the worst nightmare. This is what, as a property owner, you do not want to see. This is your worst possible nightmare. So my question for you, because the way you said that, I want to get clarification. When someone hires you guys, they're getting liability protection somehow through that?
Well, so I liken it to this. You got to watch out for number 1, because you might step in number 2, right? What they're getting is our years of experience as far as what we've seen. We've already made the mistakes. I mean, we've been down that road. So we examine all angles to safeguard and protect our exposure to liability. We are not an insurance policy, and we're an insurance policy, right? Quite simply, we have, so our lease agreement is 16 pages. A purchase agreement for a house is only 10. So you can imagine just everything, how fully comprehensive it is. Every year we pay royalties to our law firm for the updates in California, because the laws are always changing. So if you're missing what's relevant and what's the latest and greatest in protection, are you really saving anything when the medieval axe hits? You know what I mean? So if in a perfect world, if people paid their rent, we didn't have any habitability issues, construction issues, or problems or the like, we would be out of business.
In the same way that you could say, if buyers and sellers could just get along and shake a hand and do what they were going to do,
they could sell their own
they
houses.
could sell their own houses. And from the other side of it, I know the National Association of Realtors put out some stat that like 94% or 96%, I don't remember the exact number, of transactions that happened nationally in 2017 were done with a realtor involved. I would guess, I don't know the numbers of the management side, but I guess those numbers are way lower, that most people feel like, I'll do it myself.
Totally.
Whereas, exactly to your point, Erika, the liability is the same.
Oh, I beg to differ. It's worse, because once you sell the house, it's essentially over with. We actually live with those people for the duration of their term of their tenancy. So it's an ongoing battle at times to make sure we're compliant, make sure that we're not exposing ourselves and our property owners to unwanted liability. we don't get paid enough for how much trouble we could get into.
Yeah.
It's quite simply that. And so we do have the umbrella, $20 million umbrella, just so you know.
That's a lot of shards of glass.
That's, because we've had vendors go onto a property to read a water meter, and the tenant's dog bit the meter reader, and we get named in the lawsuit. Not my property, not my animal, but we get named in it. So owners just don't consider, like, wow, I never thought of that, right? Carbon monoxide detectors. We've just taken over a 5-unit building that has a laundry room. The other 5 units didn't know there was a laundry room because we have someone living in the laundry room. So and he's got a keep out sign on the door. So that's our next, task
What's
at
he
hand.
paying in rent for the
Yeah,
laundry?
yeah, the
Yeah.
monthly
Yeah.
house.
What kind of? We were talking
Now
about
we're getting to the
deals.
secrets
Yeah,
here.
the secrets.
Well, there we go.
Deals with San Diego, laundry room, Encinitas.
And you said it was easy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
All right, so I want to get to Ahmed's comment here and also talk about the problems and opportunities. I think some may be obvious, some may not. So he says, solution is simple, build multi-level rental residential complexes. They're already doing that. They've done that. The trouble is, it's not really a solution because when you're talking about the rising rents, which I believe that you're commenting on there, it doesn't, they're building those complexes because they can get the rising rent prices.
Right.
Yes.
It's not, we don't have an inventory situation where you could build so many, let's say, you could build so many of these things that now the prices are going down. We just haven't seen that. Now there is currently, and we have 2 years in a row, we have an exodus out of San Diego County.
Right.
So 2 years in a row, we have about 10,000 less people than we did the year before. That's the only thing that's going to help put a lid on this thing. But, so problems, rising rents. Problems, affordability, right? It's annoying every year. Oh, your rent's up $100, rent's up $100. That's what tends to happen in a lot of places, especially more commercial-oriented stuff. Rent's going up. Okay, so rising rents. That seems to be a problem. But it is also a good thing for people who own real estate, because the more expensive it is to rent, the safer your investment in real estate it should be.
Theoretically.
Theoretically. I mean, what we saw in the crash, and this is probably the key thing that's missed by most people who even know real estate about the crash that we saw, was that rents were so low. People were getting neg-am loans on rental properties and then renting them out for the payment. They couldn't give away stuff.
Right.
There were houses in Escala that were for rent for $1,600. Now this is right in the 2007-2008 timeframe, which now would probably rent for $3,500 or $4,000. They couldn't give them away because everyone was buying. All the people who would have been renters were all buying homes because they could get these crazy loans. So that was the reason that the market crashed, was because it was so easy for people to walk away. They were looking and going, gosh, this house over here is for rent for $1,500.
Right. Model match.
We're paying, $3,500 in this
for the
mortgage,
same
and the
house.
house is now down $100,000.
Yep.
Let's just go over, screw it.
No income verification loans. I'll take it.
We got it with
Zero
no money down, so let's just go rent.
Yep.
Yeah, we're not.
What do you have to
walking away.
lose?
Yeah.
It was such a no-brainer.
Yeah.
We saw it every
When there was
day.
no recourse,
It was
and
comical.
you were upside down, and this place was actually cheaper and it was nicer.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yep.
so we don't have that anymore.
No.
No.
That doesn't exist now. So like if you're an owner and you look at what your options are, it's not so no-brainer to be like, oh well, let's walk away from a home if we're down a little bit because there's. So I do think there's some positives. Is my point, Steve. Do you think there's any other positives?
I certainly agree. I see what you're saying, that the high rents kind of not prop up but contribute to our real estate market, the sales market, because there's not the options of, well, it may cost me $3,500 a month in my mortgage, all things included, but I'll just go rent for far cheaper because the rents have gone up so much. I think that I'm sure you guys are finding, doing the sales side as well, that many home buyers, even though they're not interested in renting the property, they are interested in what the rental comps are, because they see it as another safety net. That, well, if things get really terrible, maybe I'll move back in with mom and dad, but I can rent out the place and it'll cover my mortgage, or
Sure.
I'll only lose $100 a month.
Sure.
So I think that I agree with you. Look at us coming full circle and agreeing.
You agree? You agree with me?
No, I think we meet in the middle.
You agree with me?
This is what it's like at home. You agree with me? No, I agree. I think that we as a culture don't do enough to see the connection between the rental market and the sales market when they're so intertwined.
Absolutely, they're in direct competition. I mean, it's a payment competition for housing.
Yeah.
Right.
That's what it is. It's a
Truly.
payment competition. So when you see certain markets right now where it's the rental market is just crazy. I mean, I personally know 4 or 5 people who are trying to rent the same house in Del Mar that doesn't exist. And it's because of club volleyball and all the stuff that I'm involved in there with my daughter. But that home that doesn't exist for rent there that so many people want, if it does pop up, let's say one does pop up, how do you find it? We talked about that earlier. If it's Del Mar, for example, there's only one way you can find it that I see, and that is walking around. You got to walk the neighborhood. It just I see them occasionally because I walk the neighborhood. That's how we get exercise that way.
And to your point, there's a lot of off-market stuff that happens. In the
Yeah.
same way on the sales side that, hey, Joe's going to be selling his property. Let me call my friend and say, hey, you might want to buy Joe's place. The same thing. Renter says, hey, I'm going to be moving out at the end of this month, or we're looking for a place. If you can find, and most landlords, particularly ones that do it themselves and do it incorrectly, where they don't look at raising rent or getting appropriate with market rent. How many people are stuck with the, I say stuck, but with the same tenant for years over years over years, and they haven't made any changes because they figure it's easier. The person's already in there. They probably haven't even inspected the property in 2 or 3 years. I mean, it goes without saying, hire a pro. Here's why hire a pro. I mean, and I've come across Erika, who truly is a pro in my opinion for a variety of reasons. They do stuff like you're evicting the tenant and then all of a sudden you don't know what to do. Put them in, they'll evict the tenant. You're trying to fix up a property, they'll handle that. It goes without saying, but hire a pro. Get somebody.
There's so many properties in San Diego as well that are rental properties that are really, how do you say this nicely? Not in the best shape.
That's
Right.
not habitable.
You know, a lot of things are dated. They've been treated like a rental property. I mean, the first place I moved to in Del Mar, in this same complex that I'm in, I did the 100-foot move a few years ago. I moved from one unit to the other.
Yeah.
But it was a nightmare. It was a disaster. Everything was completely disgusting.
Yeah.
And you know, but it was clear no one had paid any attention to
Yeah.
it,
Yeah.
And
they lost me immediately.
And arguably, that landlord is making that decision over loses a good tenant who would have been there for several years, and lost them over $1,500 worth of repairs. Maybe not even that much.
yeah,
Right.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah. Depending on if you do the carpet or not. I mean, it's like, and so that's the thing. You know, what is it worth? Does it make sense to do things? There was actually one place we were looking at in Solana Beach, and this was a really interesting situation because I'd never gotten into negotiation. We were kind of tying the real estate and the rental market together here. But you know, I was walking through it with the agent, and he was showing it to me, and I was like, you know, this place is a piece of shit. Oops. and he goes, it is, but we can always ask.
Yeah.
So what do you want to do? It's like, well, they'd have to pretty much redo everything. It's like, okay, well, the rent would have to be more. Do you want me to ask?
Yeah.
And I was like, sure, let's just see what they say. And so he actually talked to the owner, and the owner said, yeah, we'll redo everything, and the rent, instead of being this much, will be this much. I was like, wow, that's interesting.
Yeah.
people forget that you have the ability to negotiate, because the rental market, you got to give up your firstborn child and your left kidney in order to get in. But
And I would say that owner is the exception to the rule. You know, most people that we encounter are accidental landlords.
What do you mean by that?
I mean, they have a second property that they can't afford, and they make us the lightning rod for their frustration over taking a bath on that second property. We had a home that a lady was paying $2,500 a month to rent, and it had a swimming pool, and the pump didn't work, so the pool was turning green. We fixed the pump. It was $300. The owner called me and pitched a fit and said, I'm driving around on 4 bald tires and you're fixing my pool pump at the rental property. Hey, well, look, people can withhold rent if you don't uphold a standard of care and living conditions for the property. That's the thing. It's like people go into this with so much less information than they should have, and they don't realize the situation they're putting themselves into. It's like I like to think we all have car insurance, but we're not planning on getting into an accident. The fellow that's living in the laundry room, this owner has 21 properties, and at least 80% of them are uninsured. Can you imagine? Imagine having a portfolio of 20 properties and not having insurance in case they burn to the ground. So we see jaw-dropping situations where it's like, you got to be kidding me, and they're out there, and they've gotten away with it for years. But my God, if I don't fix a microwave or a garbage disposal that's leaking, I get a letter from an attorney. You know what I mean?
And to your point, I think it's because most people, at least my opinion on the rental side, are so uninformed.
Totally.
Most landlords have no idea what the requirements are. Most tenants don't know their rights.
Right.
And I see it just in such a small sliver, since I'm on the sales side and not on the rental side,
Right.
that then we sell a tenant-occupied property, and truly what I'm doing is I'm going in and explaining to the tenant, hey, here's what you're allowed to do, and here's what the landlord's allowed to do, and here's what they're not allowed to do.
Yeah.
And here's how it's going to work with this sale.
Yes.
And your lease will convey.
Yeah.
So
Right.
you're going to stay here.
Yeah.
Don't worry, you got a lease.
Yeah.
You're not
Right,
getting
right,
booted.
right.
Nobody knows.
Right.
And it's all public information.
Yeah.
People can look for it, but I'm always amazed at how people are so uninformed with such a big piece that brings such liability,
Yeah.
and
Huge.
affects them so personally.
Yeah, and clearly, I think if they really knew, it would be a no-brainer, right?
Right.
I say, well, if we make $200 management fee on a property when we collect the rent, it would be like, well, if you're so set on saving money, why not cancel your car insurance and drive very carefully? You could
Yeah.
save that money too. I say you could give yourself a haircut too to save the money. It might not turn out the way you want it to.
Yeah.
So, for us, it's like, you're kidding me. You're going to do this on your own. You're going to have the baby at home, and we have the hospital and the tools right here. I say this because I encourage people to get good information, have a conversation. I'm sure you haven't thought of everything, because we certainly haven't either. Every day is a learning process for us, and we've been doing this for over a decade, So it's just...
You said accidental landlord earlier, and I use a different term to describe the same situation, which is a landlord by circumstance.
Yeah.
Or a landlord of circumstance, meaning that I had no intention of this being an investment property, but now it is.
Yes.
Because I got relocated to this place and I couldn't sell my house. That is definitely the most dangerous situation to be in. Because what I found is that most people they own the property personally, so they're personally liable for whatever takes place on that property, which is a tremendous liability to have, right? Especially when you're not living there. You can't keep tabs on what's going on.
Yeah.
Right.
So there are a lot of people who, the worst situations that I have seen regarding real estate, that involve real estate in any way, other than what happened before the Debt Relief Act and stuff like that during the crash, where banks were actually suing people for hundreds of thousands of dollars. So
Right.
other than that,
Right.
the worst things that I've seen in real estate are when people become a landlord of circumstance,
Yes.
and they have a home that they are renting out to someone at a distance.
Right.
Meaning that it's not in their neighborhood, it's not down the street,
Yeah.
it's not in a place where they can even drive to in most
Yes.
cases, it's somewhere else.
Yes.
So you get relocated from here to North Carolina, but
Yes.
you keep the home and you rent it out.
Yes.
So you have no idea what's going on.
No idea.
That is the most dangerous thing that can happen to you, because if they destroy that place,
Right.
which does happen,
Sure does.
they may have paid the rent the whole time. You thought everything was fine. You get in there, it's destroyed. 50, 60 grand.
Yep.
Insurance don't cover that.
Yeah.
Now, let me speak to that. There's a vandalism rider that you can get in your rental policy. I did have a house like that where the parents died and the adult children stayed in the house, and they literally destroyed the house. Graffiti on the walls and substantial damage. I personally have a 4-unit complex in National City where The front house, I had a tenant in there for 2 years. And they always paid the rent with money orders and never received any requests for repairs. And then one day we stopped getting rent, and I went over there, and the windows were open, but there was cloth, like, so you couldn't see through the inside of the house. My key didn't work, and then as I stepped back and looked at the property, I noticed on the roof there was a vent on the roof that wasn't there previously, and there was some new shingles around the vent. So I posted a notice to enter, and it was a marijuana grow house. And so they had drilled holes in the ceiling with duct work and hydroponics and light and fans. And you know, this was happening for 2 years right under our nose. So that was about $25,000 worth of damage, and insurance covered that. But I'm just saying, like, I bet you never thought of that. You know what I mean? You're worried about they're not watering the lawn. Guess what's going on inside the house?
They are watering the lawn.
Inside and outside.
We have had, because look, San Diego's a border town. We're right next to Mexico, so you know there's a heavy influx of drugs and things of that nature. And I also have another agent in our office who had to go to court to testify. You know, oftentimes in a two-story house, there's the storage space under the stairs, right? It's like a little closet. You can put the vacuum or anything you're not using under there. Well, they had a hasp and a padlock, and they had kidnapped somebody, and that's where they were keeping this particular person who was kidnapped. So, I mean, the down and dirty is just like you just. And I get owners that say, hey, you know, the such and such, the front yard looks like hell. That's the least of your worries. I mean, that can be fixed. What do you do in that situation? And how do you make sure that you're acting inside the law? Because the first reaction is, you know, grab a baseball bat and go clean house, right? Because that's my property. In fact, it's their property because they're in possession. And so a lot of people don't realize that. That's where we come in. I like to educate our owners that we really are worth the money, quite frankly. It's a bargain, come on, you know? So, yeah, there's just a million things. I mean, we could go on for days of the stuff that we've seen, and it's jaw-dropping. So hire a professional, at least talk to one and see if it makes sense.
If you're an accidental landlord, definitely
Yeah.
be careful.
Yeah.
And, you know, thank you guys so much for coming today.
Yeah,
It's great
absolutely.
to have you and get some insight on what's going on.
I kind of wanted to piggyback on a few things. You talked about accidental landlords. One thing that I see is that when people inherit property, or even when they get their first property and they want to rent it out, but they take a small deposit. You know, I'll do a $500 deposit and the rent is $2,200 a month. I just want to get someone in there. Oh, I want a 2-year lease. You know, well, you get them in there, close the door, and go on with my life, because of course they want to go on with their life. They don't want to be bothered with the property. Well, that's the worst thing to do. That's the absolute worst thing to do. The small deposit of $500. I mean, is that going to replace the floors if they destroy the floors? Is that going to repaint the house?
Yeah.
You know, when you need to repaint. No, that's not going to cover your expenses.
Yeah.
And a 2-year lease, just like Jason said, you know, they're in there, they're in possession. How are you going to get them out if they don't pay rent? You have given them all the power. You're thinking that you're doing yourself a favor and giving yourself, oh, I just don't want to deal with it. I want a 2-year lease. I want longevity because I want to go on with my life and I just want it to be quiet. Let me put a lid on it. No, that's not how that works. You put them in there for 2 years, you cannot get them out.
Remember the toaster oven, set it and forget it? Well, a 2-year lease, they think, oh, I don't have to worry about it for 2
Right.
years. 50% of marriages end in divorce. And you are married to that person for 2 years. And if they're the tenant from hell, you can't change the terms for those 2 years. We're dealing with a situation now also that they approached us to manage the property. I showed them our qualifications, and they said, you know, we really don't want to do that. They're a close friend of ours. We don't want to ask them for a deposit. We really want to help them. And here we are now, 14 months into a 2-year lease. No deposit, and we are having to bribe him to get out.
Right.
So the property owners are saying, you know, we should have listened to you. Exactly.
Yeah.
Keep an arm's, have a buffer, have a go-between, have an agent,
Right.
because you're emotionally attached to recovering whatever it is was promised, and you fall prey to your emotions, and we take the emotion out of it.
Exactly. It's all business.
So the The lesson is never help anyone. No matter what.
I'm glad
I
you're
mean,
listening.
Don't help your friends.
Unless you are a not-for-profit
when
business.
your friends need
Yeah.
help, tell them to fuck off.
I've even had owners say, I really don't want to raise the rent. They've been so great. They've been there for 14 years. So you're a not-for-profit business. I understand. You're a sweetheart. Let me know if another one comes available. I'll move there.
Well, that's great stuff. Thank you guys so much for coming.
Sure.
I do have to wrap it up.
Thanks
I
for
really
having us.
appreciate your time.
You bet.
Steve, great idea as always, my friend. Steve Ploetz, everyone.
Steve
Yes,
Ploetz.
Steve.
Steve
Yes,
Ploetz.
thank you, Steve.
Share this video. If that is if you want your friends to be smarter than everyone else. There's only one way to do it.